This is it. This is the Euphrates and Tigris River. This is it here. This is how it looks. This is its shape and location. This is its topology. This is the real one here, the one of history. The authentic and historical, biblical and scriptural Euphrates and Tigris River, located in Namibia and Botswana. This is it here, the historical real one, the one that we find in the Old and New Testament. This is how it looked. Now the Euphrates River and the Tigris River, both of these rivers are covered up with the place name Nassau River. The Euphrates River is covered up with the place name Nassau. And the Tigris is covered up with a place named Black Nassau. Now this river here, we first encounter the Euphrates River and the Tigris River in the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 2 verses 10 to 14. This is where we first encounter these two rivers. We find that in this passage, in this text, it reads, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pison. That is it which compasses the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compassed the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. This is it which go toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates." Now in verse 14, this is the verse where we find the Euphrates and Tigris River. You see, Hiddekel, this is the Ivri word. This is the Hebrew word for Tigris. Tigris is a Greek word, and Euphrates is a Greek word. The English word comes from the Latin, and both of those words are of the same spelling, as well as the Latin comes from the Greek, and it is of the same spelling. And the same thing applies to Tigris. Tigris, that's the English word that comes from the Latin, of the same spelling. The Latin comes from the Greek, of the same spelling. But the Ivri people, the original black Jews, they never used those words. They never used the word Euphrates nor Tigris. And referencing the Euphrates River, the original black Jews, they spoke the Ivri language, and they called the Euphrates Parat. Parat. Now the root, Parat has a root word, and the root of Parat is para. It's Parat and para. This is the Ivri word for Euphrates. Parat and para. And Tigris, the Tigris River, the Ivri word for the Tigris River is Hiddekel. And every word is going to be the H, D, K, and L. But this is this is it. The ancient, authentic Euphrates and Tigris River, covered up with the place name Nassau River. The Euphrates and Tigris River, they are also known by the phrase two rivers. Two rivers. And this phrase is called in the every language Naharain. Naharain. This is where we get the Aram Naharain. That phrase Aram Naharain refers to the two rivers, or just Naharain refers to two rivers. And we find this phrase also in Botswana with the Twin River Ring. Twin River Ring. You find that in Botswana. That's a clue to the Euphrates and Tigris River. But this is it here. Now scholars, they have built the Euphrates and Tigris River on faulty definitions. The Euphrates and Tigris have been defined erroneously by scholars, and it's done so with the sole purpose of deception, keeping the original black Jews from finding out, from locating the true location of the Euphrates and Tigris River, as well as finding out their true history. You see, once we find out the location of these rivers, we will automatically find out Mesopotamia, the true location of Mesopotamia, land between the rivers. The true location of Mesopotamia is in Africa, South Africa, in Namibia, Southwest Africa. And to hide Mesopotamia, which is the Fertile Crescent, to hide that is necessary to hide the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. And that's the reason for the deception. That's the reason for the cover up of these rivers with the place name Nassau River. And that's the reason for the faulty definition, which is done purposely for deception. Scholars have defined the Euphrates as a river that is connected to Indo-European. Indo-European. Scholars have did their best to make that connection, in which it cannot be made. Indo-European is a nonsensical term made up out of thin air. And there are some scholars that define the Euphrates River as a river arising out of Armenia. Armenia is another term made up out of thin air. It is taken from the historical term Aram. Armenia is taken from the historical term Aram, but yet the meaning, connotation, and all that goes into Armenia is made up out of thin air. It has no historical basis in facts or history at all. But nonetheless, many scholars define the Euphrates River as a Mesopotamian river arising out of the Armenian location, and that location is in Turkey. And it is from there that many scholars do their best to connect Turkey to the nonsensical term Indo-European, or sometimes it is pronounced or spelled PIE, where PIE is an abbreviation for Proto-Indo-European. And all of this connection cannot be made because the Proto-Indo-European and Indo-European, these are just terms, nonsense terms made up out of thin air, have no basis in history nor fact at all. And so that connection will never be made by these scholars. And then you have scholars that define the Tigris River by tiger, Tiger, meaning that the Tigris River comes from the concept of a tiger being forceful and violent. But that is not the meaning of the Tigris River at all. Some scholars, they define the Tigris River as a tiger that shoots arrows, where the arrows being pointy, and such pointiness points to its violent nature or forcefulness. But none of these are the meaning and definition of the Euphrates and Tigris River. All of these definitions are meant to deceive and to cover up the historical and true location of the Euphrates and Tigris River. Now, as we look at starting with Euphrates, the every word Parat has a root word which is Parat, but the every word for Parat is the letter P and the letter R. You remove both of the A's. The P and the R is the every word for Euphrates. And as we look at this word in accordance to the every language, we'll discover something very interesting. We'll get a good idea, a good clear picture and understanding of what the every people, the original black Jews, what they were saying. The letter P, this is the every letter P, spelled P-E-Y, P. And the letter R is the every letter Resh, R-E-S-H, Resh. So the letter P is P, and that gives the pictograph or the view, the understanding of an opening. An opening, something that opens up. And that opening, it comes from a small point, and when it opens, it gets wider. That's the connotation of P. Resh means head, first, top, or beginning. Now, when we put those letters together, when we put the P and the R, the Resh together, that gives the meaning of this. The original black Jews, they are letting us know that Resh is referring to the Euphrates. The P and the R is referring to the Euphrates River. It's not referring to the Tigris just yet, but it first refers to the Euphrates as a river that opens up. This is the Apet, the letter P. P is the every P, and that means an opening. An opening that opens up starts from a narrow position, a narrow point, and this is the narrow point, and it opens. And as it opens, it gets wider. This is the Apet. The Resh, meaning first, head or top. That lets us know that in order for this opening to take place with this river, the river must exist and flow first. The first must be a river in order for this opening to take place. And this is what the Resh, the R, means. The first must be a river. This is the first. This is what Resh means in reference to the Euphrates. And the Pe is in reference to the Euphrates as well. So the river Euphrates, it exists first, and we see that here. It flows all the way down to South Africa. And this is just the Euphrates. The Tigris River is not in this region. As we go up, This is still Euphrates. Then, at this junction, this is where the Euphrates opens up. And the Euphrates goes this way, it goes westward, and it opens up, and this tributary, it goes eastward. So this is the pay. The opening of the Euphrates is pay. This is what the original black Jews were referring to, that the Euphrates opens up, and they call that pay. Now the Tigris River. The meaning of the Tigris River, what the original black Jews was letting us know when they saw this river, they were giving a description of it in the Ivri language. And again, the Ivri for the Tigris River, Hiddekel, is the H-D-K-L. This is Hiddekel. Keep in mind, the original black Jews, they spoke the Ivri language. They never used this word Tigris. They said Hiddekel. And this is the word that we find in the scriptures in Genesis chapter 2. And then in the word Hiddekel, you have to remove the vowels, and you're going to have the H, D, K, and L. This is the Ivri word for the Tigris, what we call the Tigris River. The meaning of these letters is the following. H is the Ivri Het. Het is spelled H-E-T. Sometimes it's spelled with two H's, H-H-E-T. Or it can be spelled with a C, C-H-E-T. But Het is the picture of a tent with a wall. And it gives a meaning of a wall that is outside, divide and half, to cut in half. That's Het. The D is Dalet. In Ivri, the letter D is Dalet. Dalet gives the picture of a door meaning to move, hang, and interest. Now the movement of this door, it hangs, it is hinged, it is attached to something. And when it is closed, it is just an attachment to something that presents a one line. But when it opens, it moves from the hinged part. It moves and opens up. And this is what the Ivri letter Dalet, it gives this connotation of something that is hinged, where that hingement refers to an attachment to something else. And as it moves, it opens up. So that's the connotation of Dalet. The K is the Ivri Kaf, spelled K-A-P-H, Kaf. This letter, it gives the picture of a palm with a bend. And this bend in the palm, it opens up. It's basically giving the same meaning of the Dalet, but it's a palm with a bend. This is the bend, this bend here, and it opens up, starting from a narrow position, and as it opens, it gets wider. The palm with the bend. That's the Dalet. That's the Kaf. That's what Kaf gives the connotation of a palm with a bend that opens up. Now the L is Lamet. This is the shepherd's staff. Now with the staff, it's a line, and at one of the ends of the staff, it is a hook. And that hook is used to grab the sheep, to grab them and secure them, then to drive them in a safe direction and to guide them. So with the Lamed, we are given the meaning of teach, yoke, authority, and bind. Yoke and bind is an attachment. When something is yoked, it is attached to something else. When something is bind, it is attached to something else. And so this river, the Tigris, it is attached, it is bound or bound to the Euphrates. This is the attachment. This is the Lamed that the Ivri people, the original black Jews, this is what they're referring to when they use the Ivri letter Lamed. The Tigris River is attached to the Euphrates. This is the Lamed. And from this attachment, it is yoke. And from this yoke, it can be led and guided. It'll be led and guided into a direction. So with these letters, when all these letters, the H, D, K, and L, they're put together, it gives the proper meaning of a river that divides, where the division is done with force. This is a part of the Lamed, where it means to teach. Where this division, this attachment, this river that is attached to the Euphrates, is forcefully opens. It opens with force. And now this is one characteristic of the Tigris River in comparison to the Euphrates. You see, the Tigris, it flows forcefully, and it is faster in its flow than the Euphrates. So that's the meaning of the Tigris River as well as the Euphrates. That is the meaning that the original black Jews, when they saw this river, divided waters, this is what they were describing. And so every language, the original black Jews, they always used their language in two ways. The first way is every language is going to be used is in a description of a person, whether that is the name or describing the physical features. It's always used in a description of a person. That's the first category. The second category, the way the Ivri people use their language, is describing what they see in the earth or the earth itself. They always use it, secondly, as a description of something they see in the earth or the earth itself. And in this case, they're looking at this river, the Euphrates River. They see that this river is a long river. They don't see the division yet, the opening up yet. They don't see the Tigris River yet. But they see just one river, the Euphrates, that they call Parat. They see this river, and then they see at a certain point of the flow of this river, they notice a division, a dividing river. And that division is what they call Hiddekel. The river by itself is what they call Parat, the Euphrates. Then when it divides, that is what the original black Jews call it Hiddekel. Hiddekel, a divided water that flows forcefully from the division. It flows forcefully from its dividedness or division. And that is the meaning of the Tigris and Euphrates River, given by the original black Jews. But again, this river is covered up with a place name, Nassau River. It is covered up with the white Nassau, refers to the Euphrates, and black Nassau refers to the Tigris. Now the reason for the white Nassau is due to the settlement. That is a description of the river, the Euphrates. The Euphrates River is clearer than the Tigris. And that is due to the settlement that is found in the earth, in the bottom of the river. It's less settlement in the Euphrates River than the Tigris. The Tigris has more settlement, more dark, earthly clay settlement, which makes the river darker in appearance than the Euphrates. Now the Euphrates and Tigris River, once you find these rivers, you're going to automatically find Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. And one of the ways of verifying whether we have correct information and that the Nassau rivers are the Euphrates and Tigris River, there actually are several ways. One of the ways is this. This is the Euphrates River here. One of the ways is Babylon. This is the true historical, authentic, and ancient Babylon. This is it here. Babylon is covered up with the place name Witflay. But Babylon is the only kingdom that sits on the Euphrates River on both sides. And it sits in a north-south position. Now, once we find and locate Babylon, and we see and confirm that it sits on the Euphrates River on both sides, this is a historical evidence and confirmation that we have the correct river, the Euphrates River. Because Babylon is the only kingdom in history, and even today in time, the only kingdom that sits on both sides of the Euphrates River. And this is it here. This is what we're looking at here. This is northern Babylon, all this, and this is southern Babylon, all of this here. And this is the Euphrates River. So that's one confirmation here, that we have the correct information, the correct location of the Euphrates River. Once we find the Euphrates, we automatically find the Tigris, because the Tigris comes from the Euphrates. And both of these rivers, they run parallel to each other. Now, another piece of evidence is this. Thutmose I, he made extensive improvements in expanding the borders of Upper Egypt all the way to the Euphrates River. And he brought the borders to the Euphrates River, and then he went west all the way to the kingdom of Aryan. This is another piece of historical evidence that proves the correct location of the Euphrates River. Another one is this. Looking at old maps of Hecate, Homer, and Herodotus, we notice something interesting. In the area of Southwest Asia, the area that is commonly called the Middle East, all of this over here, you notice that there is no Euphrates River. There's no listing of Euphrates and Tigris River here. This is Israel. This is where the fraudulent location of Israel is, in this area here. And there is no mentioning, there's no record of Jerusalem, of any mountains, any rivers of Jerusalem, of Israel. Hecate, he did not record any listing of Israel, anything that Israel contained. He made no record of it in the Middle East. And we find the same thing with Homer. No record of Israel, Jerusalem, no record of any rivers of Israel, any mountains, no Euphrates, no Tigris River. And we find the same thing again with Herodotus. There's no record of Israel, Jerusalem, any mountains, any rivers. No Euphrates, no Tigris River. Written and located in this area here in Southwest Asia. So we have 3 historians that recorded the same thing, letting us know that the Euphrates did not exist there. Israel, Jerusalem, Judah, all the mountains, all the rivers of Israel does not exist there, did not exist there at all. So that is another piece of information that confirms the true location of the Euphrates River. With these old maps, also with the historical setting of Babylon, sitting on both sides of the Euphrates River, and another piece of evidence that confirms the true location is the Assyrian kingdom, Ashur. This is it here, Nineveh. This is where Nineveh is. All of this here, the Assyrian Empire, Ashur, is covered up with a place named Gobigus. But the location, the existence, the historical existence of the Assyrian kingdom is confirmation of the true location of the Tigris River. And once we find the Tigris River, we automatically find the Euphrates River, as they both run parallel to each other. So with that information, that is a historical piece of information and confirmation of the true location of the Euphrates River. And this is how it looked. This is it here. This is the real thing. The Euphrates and Tigris River that run parallel to each other. And again, once you find both of these rivers, you find Mesopotamia. You find the Fertile Crescent. You're going to find Nineveh and Babylon. You're going to find the Upper Egypt, the borders of Upper Egypt. And you'll find the kingdom of Aryan, which is called Syria, and covered up with a place named Windhoek. This is it here, Euphrates and Tigris River. And these 2 rivers are first mentioned in Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 through 14. And it is mentioned as 2 rivers that flow from a river, and that river flows from the Garden of Eden. That is giving us a clue to the location of the Garden of Eden, and we can trace the flow of the Euphrates down to South Africa, and that is the location of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is located in South Africa. But this is it here. Along the Euphrates River, you're going to find also Ur of the Chaldees. This is where Abraham is from. This is where Abraham had his beginnings, in Ur. As we proceed down the Euphrates, we're also going to find the kingdom of Haran. Haran is located right here. Haran also goes by the spelling and pronunciation of Huran, or Hurrian, spelled with a U. Now this is Haran, the historical Haran, or is also spelled without the H and just Aran. This is it here, the historical kingdom, Haran, that sits immediately east of the Euphrates River. And the Euphrates River is a long river. Out of the 2 rivers, the Euphrates is longer than the Tigris, but the Tigris is faster than the Euphrates. Now, another interesting thing about the Euphrates is that according to Revelations chapter 16, the angel poured out his veil and dried up the Euphrates River. Now the Euphrates in the so-called Middle East, that Euphrates is still flowing. And this is another piece of evidence for the true location of the true Euphrates River. The Euphrates River in Africa, in Namibia, Southwest Africa, that river has been dried up since 1989. Since 1989. It has not flowed since then. And that is a fulfillment of Revelations chapter 16. And that is the authentication and validation of the true location of the Euphrates River being in Namibia, Southwest Africa, and not in the fraudulent location called the Middle East. This is it here. The Euphrates River covered up with a place named Mafsa River. This is its true location in Africa. In South Africa, the Euphrates, it flows through Namibia, and then it goes in Botswana. This line here is the division between Namibia and Botswana. This is the Euphrates. It's in Namibia, and now it's flowing in Botswana. And it continues going south. And this is where we're going to find the, we're in Botswana now. This is where we find the two rivers. Remember the Euphrates, it also goes by the phrase, two rivers. But this is it. This is where the two rivers, the Twin River Ring, it's located here, and that is information. They're giving us a heads up of the two rivers, where it's going to be located in Botswana and Namibia. Twin River Ring. But this is the historical Euphrates River, the real one, the one of history, the one of scripture. This is its location. This is how it looked. The Euphrates and Tigris River, covered up with a place named Mafsa River. And its true location is in Namibia, Southwest Africa. This is the real one.